Okay, everybody comfortable? Cell phones off, right? Okay, here we go.
Bam bam, mon ça se passe, j'ai sur mon lit à bouffer sa langue en buvant grand mon whisky. Quant à moi, peu dormi, vie débris, mais j'ai dû dormir dans la gouttière où j'ai eu un flash.
From Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the palatial FYC studio, you're listening to All Things Considered.
The podcast where we ask you to consider all things instead of presenting you with a classic for your consideration.
I'm your host, Mike Josick.
And I'm Dustin Friesenan.
And hello to all our listeners who are catching the show on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever
great pods are cast.
And if you're one of the many listeners who catch the show on iTunes, we would appreciate you taking the time to subscribe, rate, and review the show while you're there, as it helps grow the audience in a quantifiable way. And we also just love to hear what you guys have to say about the podcast. If you've listened to the show before, welcome back. If this is your first time listening to the show, spoilers ahead. All right, so continuing this series of Dustin and I checking out first-run movies in the theater and doing our reviews of them. This is our episode not covering Avengers Infinity War.
Instead, we'll be looking at Super Troopers 2, aka Super Troopers 2 Mountie Mayhem Dairy.
The reason I call out the Avengers Infinity War is just because it seemed like the typical one to go with. It's the one that everyone's going to be watching and talking about. And Super Troopers 2, I mean, we don't do many comedies on the show, and this was kind of on deck, and we thought...
And so many people consider Super Troopers to be a classic as it is.
That's true.
Whereas so many of the superhero movies are, you've seen one, you've seen them all sort of deal to an extent.
This is also true.
There's exceptions, and we hope to get to some of those. Wonder Woman, for example, was exceptional.
Justice League was not.
I thought Deadpool was.
Ant-Man was not. So Super Troopers is a 2018 movie that was written by Broken Lizard and directed by Jay Chandrasekhar.
Who also starred in the film.
I wanted to make sure you had your full team back.
Back in business! Pele! Oh. We are under assault! I got glitter!
Glittering and?
Rabbit. My name's Rabbit.
What pills do we have?
Not sure. I think it's a mood enhancer.
Oh!
I know I'm in a better mood.
Loser cuts his pinky toe off with a shovel.
Take that bet.
I suggest you take
that
the bet, Rabbit.
Super Troopers 2. Rated R.
It's been a long time since I've seen the original Super Troopers. I have fond-ish memories of it. I remember it being funny. I remember enjoying it. It wasn't, a life-changing experience. I didn't start replacing all of my nows with meows like some people did. I used to work in a car dealership. At the time I saw the movie, I was in the car dealership, and all the guys there they just adopted everything from that movie, and Will Ferrell. I was just inundated with that. I think ultimately that might be why I got out of the business.
I know I was hit with much the same thing myself. A few of my friends considered it the greatest film of all time, effectively. And I thought, yeah, okay, it's good, but it's not that good. And looking back on it now, the only thing that's really coloring my impression of it is that basically it's a movie where the main premise is, hey, let's date rape chicks to try to get them to go out with us.
Wah, wah.
So it hasn't aged as well, perhaps, as it could have. But looking at it at the new one, it is about as immature and dumb as you would expect. This time the plot being that, due to some crazy legal shenanigans, part of Canada is going to be...
Or chicanery.
Or chicanery. They wishes it was shenanigans. Part of Canada is going to be part of the States. Right, meow. And...
Meowing forever.
And they're trying to do the laziest sort of smuggling that you've ever seen, as though moving around illegal drugs is going to be that much easier once that happens. Passive smuggling.
I'm honestly surprised they didn't make a joke about how Canadian that is. Because they made all the sorry jokes and the politeness jokes that you would expect.
The accent jokes.
So I totally thought, as soon as they came up with the idea of passive smuggling, that they would just be like, that's so Canadian.
And of course they made all the metric jokes. The aren't Canadians supposed to be nice jokes.
What does that say about me that I found the metric jokes really funny?
Those I enjoyed. Last I checked, there was 3 countries in the world that still use the imperial system. Yemen, another third world country that has since adopted the metric system, and the United States of America.
I believe third world is no longer an approved term. They are developing countries, Dustin.
And another developing country that has developed itself enough that they understand metric, unlike the States. But one thing that they definitely got wrong in our legal system is talking about the bordello that they had there, the brothel.
I knew this would be a sticking point with you.
That's right. I saw that. I'm like, no! That is specifically made illegal under our laws. And being a John has been made illegal thanks to Bill C-51, I believe, under the Harper administration. Though prostitution itself is still legal, you just got to get a license for it. The more you know.
Actually, I don't know if it's across Canada or if it's provincial, because for anybody who doesn't understand, there's the federal government who has kind of an overarching, developing laws and control over the country, but each province has its own government. I'm sure...
My understanding of it, within the pooning community, as it is called, is that it is a federally mandated law that the provinces don't tend to have exceptions for.
I was just going to say, I'm originally from Saskatchewan, and they had a law that they introduced a while ago where you couldn't even drink alcohol.
At a strip club,
yes. At a strip club, yeah.
I read a paper from one of the strippers
saying... Is that a national law?
No, that is just Saskatchewan,
okay.
And a lot of Saskatchewan strippers have complained about that because it is actually pushing a lot of them to prostitution and doing private house parties, which are far more dangerous for them. A lot of these laws that limit prostitution actually serve to harm the women.
But that's another podcast.
And I've got lots to say about it. Anywho, moving on to the dumb movie.
One of the things that kind of... I read some reviews going into it because some reviews came out before Friday, and we watched it Saturday afternoon, Saturday the 21st of April.
30 minutes ago.
So, still pretty fresh. And a lot of the responses basically said that they laughed... There were funny jokes in it, but ultimately the story kind of bogs it down. And I went in, you have to hang the jokes on something. Otherwise it's just a sketch show. But there are points where it does sort of feel like the movie is distracted by having to continue developing this plot of this passive smuggling. I think as a result, the movie's a little less funny than it could be. I think that's evidenced just by watching the bloopers during the credits. I think we just laughed from sort of beginning to end while the credits were running.
But bloopers are special like that. They've already had everything set up for you.
I suppose.
Because if you had just the bloopers for something that you've never seen before, it's dumb. I've seen them before where I look at nothing but bloopers for something I haven't seen and it's not funny. But had I seen the movie, I'd already be in that state of mind, that frame of mind to enjoy them. So bloopers are a little bit special in that sense. It's almost an in-joke that you get from the previous hour and a half, 2 hours.
Dustin wins the set. Service returns to him. I did enjoy the movie. I have no regrets about seeing it. I didn't, I wasn't squirming in my seat, desperately wondering when I was going to be able to get out.
Though you were wondering, or a little surprised that at any point in your life you paid money to see a Superbad movie.
Super Troopers
movie.
Yeah, that's just part and parcel of kind of the new mandate of the show. We're going to pay to see movies that we wouldn't necessarily pay to go see, specifically for the purpose of reviewing them and seeing stuff that we maybe wouldn't normally see. But it was an enjoyable movie, and it's a comedy, so it's not like a 2.5 hour epic. And it does have some entertaining jokes in it, and it was fun. There's a couple characters I do particularly enjoy.
And then there's the Flarvas where you're just like, screw this guy. Let's take him right out of there. All he does is stir shit up, and I can understand that necessity sometimes, but...
I was super curious how they were going to bring their very juvenile fraternity style of humor into a late 2000 teens movie in what we would hope is a much more woke culture. I think they walked a very fine line. They were clearly trying to include things that were more inclusive and a little less... the movie wasn't full of a bunch of gay jokes and sex jokes necessarily.
The few that they had, they did include, or they were at the brothel and they're like, hey, want a couple women? No, thanks. Oh, I understand. Couple men? No. No men, no women? What, beavers?
River beaver?
No, that'd be crazy. Their teeth are too sharp. And I appreciate how they did that. They didn't draw attention to anything, and the extra comments on the end and the beavers, it's like, you make that sound like you tried this shit before.
There was a weird sort of sense of inclusiveness, and I kind of feel like there's a little subplot. Part of the passive smuggling scheme is there's guns, there's drugs, there's black market iPhones, or A-phones, as they say. There's a feminine...
Female...
sex enhancer.
Yes. Basically a female version of Viagra called Flova Scotia.
And one of the characters starts taking it and starts exhibiting...
stereotypical female reactions. Right. And that's the one thing that I'd say really kind of dumb as shit.
And I'm still a little bit... I'm wondering... It was walking this line where clearly Jay Chandrasekhar's character was doing these stereotypically female things, but they could have been poking jokes in a far more specific, unpleasant way, and they weren't.
The one thing that I'll give to its credit is that he was the only person doing that. Any other female character was perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's an example of how I think this movie, they're trying to maybe evolve. Broken Lizard is trying to evolve their humor a little bit so that it's not so sexist or racist or, whatever. The locker room humor, essentially.
Why is it so hard for them to shave his balls? Like, as somebody who shaves his balls naturally, it's not a big deal.
I'm so editing that out. We do not need to talk about anybody shaving their balls.
He treats it like he treats shaving his balls like it's just the worst thing in the world. He gets his nuts in a friggin' bandsaw, and it's like, no, you don't have to worry about anything. Just don't shave my balls. Really? Calm the shit down.
I don't know if I would want those guys coming near my nutsack with a straight razor.
He's okay if they're coming near his nutsack with a suture, but his teammates, yeah, screw that. You're not getting anywhere. But the
medic at the end.
Yeah, the paramedic. Yeah. When the paramedic's coming at you with a razor, then it's like, yeah, sure, like, you do this as a job. I trust you. I'm trusting you with a suture near my nutsack.
Maybe by that point it was just on principle.
Just do what they say. But long story short, just go into the movie expecting some dumb humor and a lot of weird Canadian stereotypes. And for those of us who are in Edmonton, one random mockery of Calgary.
There were some cute cameos. I mean, Rob Lowe plays a
mayor
flippy Trudeau-like mayor
owner.
brothel owner, yeah. I honestly would have preferred to see a Canadian in that role, but okay, Rob Lowe, sure.
For whatever reason, they have their town council is like this lodge out in the woods.
You've got Sean William Scott and Damon Wayans at the beginning, which was fun to see. They do a big thing with I can't remember the guy's name, but the original guy they pulled over and did the right meow joke. They do this whole shtick with him.
Jim Gaffigan.
Okay, yeah, it was funny. Tyler Labine is in it. I thought for a while, for most of the movie, I thought he was Paul Gross. But
I was surprised to recognize Will Sasso, just because I'm terrible at recognizing actors. But
Will Sasso was bonkers, and Tyler Labine was fun. I'm trying to think.
That's what's fun about doing a whole lot of those sort of pullover sort of gags. You can have unnecessary, just famous people drops. Weird small cameos for no reason. That's the dream.
So yeah, it's, you're not going to regret watching this, but it's not going to, light your life on fire or anything. It's not the funniest comedy you'll ever see. It's probably one of the more... Brian Cox was actually pretty entertaining in this movie.
I'm trying to remember who that was.
He was the boss.
Yes.
He was the guy doing the karaoke.
Karaoke.
Yeah, that was the sign behind him. Instead of karaoke, there's a sign on the stairs that said karaoke.
Alrighty.
Yeah. And Linda Carter playing the governor, which was also fun. But I think, that also says something about the movie when a chunk of my pleasure in watching the movie was just calling out cameos.
Basically, it's a movie that you see once. It's not going to go down in the annals of history. It's not going to change your life or change your philosophy, but you'll get some chuckles out of it.
Good on them for making it. And, this thing was partially funded by an Indiegogo campaign, so obviously there was an audience of people who wanted to see a sequel to Super Troopers, and they got it. I know A lot of people probably didn't care whether Veronica Mars got a sequel, and when that broke records for crowdfunding, they made something like $5 million in 48 hours or something. Like, it was crazy. But I wanted to see that, and it came out, and whether it set the world on fire or not didn't matter to me. It's just, it was nice to see those characters again. So ultimately, if you're a fan of the first movie, totally see this movie. This is like totally up your alley. You will probably enjoy it a lot.
Or if you're a fan of this kind of movie, you'll enjoy it.
If you're just looking for a comedy that you can kind of relax with and, maybe have a conversation with somebody while you're watching it, this is right there. But just go in with very measured expectations.
Call back to old Will Sasso sketch from Mad TV. Lowered expectations. Moving on to the movies that we recommend each other.
Moving on to the real reason you're listening to this episode.
Where we're considering all things, not just non-classics, I guess.
So whose movie are we starting with here?
Doesn't really matter, so I'll start.
All right.
This time around, I had you watch a mystery thriller as opposed to just a regular mystery.
I would say Vidok was a thriller.
In that case, another mystery thriller, because I'm unoriginal, apparently. This is the 2009 British film Triangle, written and directed by Christopher Smith.
You know what I do when I have a bad dream? I close my eyes, and I think of something nice.
So let's go sailing.
Wind's dropped out on us.
Get below deck now. Get the life jacket. Oh, thank God. Hello?
Where is everybody?
You enter a place you have never been.
I recognize this corridor.
Everything you see, you have seen before.
It's starting over again. That's what's going on. Everything that happened to you before. He's dead! Change the pattern. We changed the pattern and we're not trapped. Who are you?
This is the fourth time I think I've seen this film. I saw it twice in like the last week to sort of refamiliarize myself, and then Mike saw it yesterday. I was like, oh, I'll sit in on that. It is one of those good old time travel sort of repeating things going on there. It's a closed time loop, and I think that they did it very well. One of the things that you'll see in a lot of shows with time loops and whatnot is almost one continuous causal relationship happening that may or may not get broken. But here, the thing I didn't notice was a bunch of threes, and I'm wondering if there was three separate time loops sort of working in conjunction with each other as she tries to break it. And either way,
it was like a Venn diagram of a story.
Oh yeah, there's so many different stories happening, overlapping each other, and I wonder how many of them are working together, all in this sort of, well, as the movie would say, Sisyphean task of trying to escape from what she's wrought herself. There's, of course, a bunch of Greek myth sort of strewn about. They hammer home a few things a little too bluntly, I think, for sure. I know Mike was surprised at how young Liam Hemsworth was. Just did not believe that he was 18, 19 during the filming of this.
During the movie, they mentioned that this kid on this boat is like 18, and Liam Hemsworth is there, and I'm like, there's no way he's 18. I'm so thrown by looking at him, it takes me out of the movie. Dustin looks up how old he was, and he was like 19 at the year of release of this movie. Like, what the fuck, internet?
They grow him big in Australia. He looks like Chris Hemsworth.
To be fair, I was able to actually focus on the movie a lot more once we figured that out, though.
Good thing I looked it up quickly. But there's a lot of circling things, and there's a lot of behavior that actually I really enjoyed in this one. Her reactions as she slowly tries to work it all out, and eventually forgetting the whole thing as part of almost her afterlife punishment for her crimes. It actually reminded me a whole lot of Hellraiser 5 Inferno because you fucked up your family life and now this is what you get forever. And so my question is, what did you think of it, Michael? Mikhail? Mickey? Mitch?
My name is just Mike.
Mike.
There's no Michael. This movie actually reminded me a lot of your last selection, Vidok, because it was an indie movie, it was a modest budget, it was a high concept, it was a mystery thriller, it was...
from Europe.
Potentially supernatural, but not supernatural, although maybe a little supernatural.
Bordering the English Canal.
And I wasn't really loving it until, I think, about 40 minutes into the movie.
When that shotgun was thrown?
When that shotgun was thrown, which remains my favorite scene in the movie. One character is shooting at another character, chasing them. When they run out of bullets, the person looks back at them, and there's a click in the gun. And I was thinking, fuck, I hope she throws the gun at her. And then the shotgun gets thrown, and I'm like, yes! But that was really when things started getting, real questions started being asked. Who is causing this? Why is this happening? And that's also when the first kind of reboot happens.
And you were asking at that time, how far are we into this? Oh, 40 minutes? Really? And you're surprised that everyone's dead already? Yeah, a lot seems to have happened.
So I became a lot more interested in the movie after that, and I started, letting the narrative style and the plot kind of wash over me. There's some weak performances, some good performances. I'm super disappointed in how Liam Hemsworth's character dies. It's so banal, but maybe that's the point.
Just a short little accidental, could have happened to anyone.
And I like the fact, by the end of the movie, I like the fact that it leaves you with some questions. You do wonder if things are going to start again. You do wonder at what point did things actually start. You kind of start breaking things down, and you realize, someone spent a lot of time constructing this, and it probably wasn't super easy.
Somebody has this string all over the walls with pictures all over it trying to connect everything to make sure that when they did this film, everything lined up. And it did. That's another thing I appreciated. You're not ever really when did this happen? All questions are answered.
But it also suffers from the fact that it is such a high concept that, I think it's 50-50. When you're going really high concept, you either just don't sell the idea. Maybe it's not 50-50. Maybe it's maybe it's 40-40-20. You either totally sell the concept, you don't sell the concept, or you just sort of miss it by a hair. I kind of feel like this one maybe missed it a little bit by a hair, because there were scenes where it felt like, oh, this scene has to be here in order to keep this mechanism moving. There were points where it didn't feel as organic as it could have. That could just be a budgetary thing. That could be a lot of things. But it did interrupt the flow for me. And I very much got the feeling that somebody was like, oh, hey, I know somebody who can get me access to a boat for 2 weeks. I'm going to write a movie around a boat, and we're going to do this movie.
I know one thing I was left with by the end with my viewings is I didn't think of anyone but her as a character. Everyone else
Agreed.
Is basically there to punish her specifically. All constructs. So that any of their behavior that might seem out of place...
Probably real at some point, but now just part of the circle, the system.
Exactly. So they're all distorted representations. So it's her specifically, her behavior that I'm looking at to see if that lines up, whereas nobody else's effectively matters.
Well, also as the dynamic changes, as she starts to try to change the way things work, you'd have to expect people to maybe react a little bit differently. Although, okay, this movie is peppered with some really cheeseball scenes and some cheeseball acting. Not a lot, but it stands out when it happens. But it also has some moments of just real fucking brilliance. Like when the character who gets stabbed, when she crawls up to that upper deck and she crawls into the corner where her character has apparently crawled 50 times before, and the place is just littered with her corpses, and she's crawling into this graveyard that she's kind of made for herself. It's a creepy image. It has a lot of, it kind of makes you think. And
anytime you see a big pile of repeated objects, that's a significant thing in the film. And the seagulls that appear all the time, also significant.
And it's just one of those moments where it's so on point, it's so pitch perfect, and those are the reasons why I would say I enjoyed watching this movie. I may revisit it at some point. I don't know if I'd be like, oh, you have to watch Triangle, let's watch Triangle. But, again, no regrets for having watched this movie. A very similar reaction to Vidok, actually. I watched Vidok, and there were moments at the beginning where I was like, oh, fuck you, Dustin, for making me watch this. And then by the end of it, I got kind of swept up in all the machinations and weirdness of it. Same deal with Triangle. And I think anybody who watches this movie is going to at least come out with some questions and having, their brain poked a little bit, which can't really say boo to that. So.
And so with those sort of recommendations, what about the one that you recommended for me?
The movie that I chose, 1984's 2010, The Year We Make Contact, written and directed by Peter Hyams.
How are you going to convince your people to allow Americans to go on the flight?
We are going to get there first, and you have the knowledge to make the trip work.
I'm going on the flight.
How far away is Jupiter?
Far.
Mommy said you're going to be asleep for a long time. Are you going to die?
Dr. Floyd. Dr. Floyd. Dr. Arloff has encountered some strange data coming from Europa. I will send Max down with a pod.
I wouldn't do that.
Oh, really?
If you want to send a pod down there, send an unmanned one. If this data is correct, then there's something down there.
It is correct. It was organic. There was life.
Is it moving?
Yes.
It's incredible. Listen for a minute. We've got to get out of here.
I can't just order us to leave here for no reason.
Forget reason. There's no time to be reasonable. I can't find him!
Are you sure you are making the right decision? I think we should stop.
You see, something's going to happen. What? Something wonderful.
Basically, in direct response to our 2001 episode, which came out a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how the story continues, and you were like, I don't want to hear it. We're talking about this movie. So I was like, okay, well, you're going to watch that movie because I want you to see that movie. And I remember seeing this movie back in 84, and I remember finding out what was going on and getting a little bit of the backstory. This is the stuff, 2001 is such a tone poem. It's such a mood piece, or as you called it, a tech demonstration.
Tech demo, 100%.
So getting this other angle on it, I really appreciated. And it's a very different movie. I think it complements the original really well. And I think the two make a nice little package. And I'm glad that they didn't try to make the exact same movie as 2001.
Me too.
So, yeah, mostly I love it for just being like a really well-made, accomplished sci-fi pick. I love the cast. I think it's a well-adapted story. I think it builds on the mythology. I love Roy Scheider in it. I love Helen Mirren in it. I love Yakov Smirnoff in it. I love John Lithgow in it. Bob Balaban. And Hal. Just seeing Hal again was great. Dave Bowman, I like the role that he's playing. How there's this build-up to this cosmic event that's going to sort of change the course of human development and evolution and relationships and whatever, which is sort of the thing started in 2001. And, both movies were based on Arthur C. Clarke stories, so you got to expect some shared DNA. But what did you think of the movie? What was, knowing what you thought of 2001, how did you feel about the sequel?
I actually quite enjoyed the sequel. The main premise of the movie, as far as I'm concerned, has nothing to do with the monolith or any of that. It's about the Cold War, during which this whole thing was filmed and actually released. But it, of course, has the Americans having to join the Russians on their trip out there, because otherwise the Russians are going to get there first, but the Russians need the American help because they have the info. Well, let's make a joint project. And they're getting constantly peppered with information about near wars, which turns into an actual war back home, and they're trying to deal with it. You've got the people who don't give a crap that there's a war going on, and they get to know each other, and I love just the human element of it. All the people, their acting is fantastic, the characters are very relatable, and I love how they did all of that. When I was watching it, one of the things I thought was, well, just like in the last episode where I said you could cut down 2001 by 2 hours, yeah, do that. Cut it down into a half-hour thing that you throw at the beginning of this film, and that's all you need. That's the super cut I want to see. But if there was anything that was to complain about with this film, it's the whole monoliths reproducing thing. Like, I thought that started looking pretty dumb and was nearly irrelevant.
Dumb as in really early visual effects,
and even just
effects, or dumb
well,
as
the
in
monolith,
conceptually,
because the monolith itself, I always felt that was almost like a single being.
Monolith.
Exactly. Mono. But then you have these polyliths that are just everywhere, and it seems to remove the strength, the gravitas of a monolith, period. It's just like, well, if one is crazy and awesome, what if there was 7 kajillion of them? And it just loses all power to me. Though the message, of course, at the end is just that of peace, and I sort of get almost a religious thing going on here where they created life, and now they're giving us a rule. The universe is our Garden of Eden. Just stay the fuck off Europa, because that'll be bad times. I almost expect 2044, oops, we ate the apple, to be the sequel.
Arthur C. Clarke did write 2 sequels. 2061 is the third Odyssey, and then it's like 3016 or something, or
do they go to Europa?
3001. I don't know. I haven't read them. And, you know, Garrett, thank you so much for the offer to lend us your books. But we do have access to copies of our own. We can take care of that. But thanks, pal.
Much obliged.
Yeah, I don't know about the monolith. I mean, for me, that sort of increased the scope of it. And maybe you do need like 7 kajillion monoliths to swallow Jupiter and turn it into a sun.
Which is just, like, scientifically, that's going to fuck up everything.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, you know, racing a nuclear explosion on a motorbike as they're flying away, you know,
I meant more
burn.
in the sense of having a second sun in the universe that close.
It will change our climate, yeah.
Our climate is fucked. We're dead. We're done now.
It is an idea that needs, I think, a little more exploration. And this is something we talked about. As much as I, you know, respect and enjoy brevity and economy in a narrative, I actually thought there were some ideas in this movie that could have been fleshed out a little more. I would happily have added 15 or 20 minutes to this film just to get a little bit more of the mood in, because it moves at a pretty good clip. And apparently the mission itself, once they're, you know, between Io and Jupiter, apparently the mission runs for several weeks. Dr. Chandra spends several weeks reprogramming and reviving Hal.
Speaking of which, I loved how he insisted on telling the truth to Hal in spite of everyone else.
Best scene.
Because so often there's just disrespect for AI, which is how it all went to hell last time to an extent. But he's like, no, just treat it like a reasonable person and you'll be surprised.
And the way Hal is just like, thank you for telling me the truth, Dr. Chandra. And Hal's whole point was to like successfully complete the mission. And if the mission is going south, I'm sure Hal understands that, you know, as shitty as it is for the AI, priority is to keep the humans alive and get them home. So I'm sure that's what Dr. Chandra was counting on when he broached that idea with Hal. And
especially when the lie is what caused the whole problem in the first movie. Spoilers.
Well, we said spoilers at the beginning of the podcast, so.
But as a character piece, fantastic. The relationship between John Lithgow and Max, beautiful.
I like the fact, you know, as much, I've seen this movie a few times. It's been a while since I have seen it, but this is the first time that I realized that the hat that John Lithgow wears is Yakov Smirnov's character's hat. And he's wearing it out of respect because he'd built a relationship with that character. And it just made me like Lithgow's character like even more. And they don't draw attention to it. It's just there. I think Hyams just did such a really good job of character building and not letting these characters get swallowed up in this narrative. I mean, there was probably a lot of pressure to how many answers do we put in here, and we only have so much time because it was one of the larger productions of 1983 to be released in 84. And, you know, when a studio's footing the bill for a big movie, sci-fi, whatever, most studios are just like, people want to see machinery, they want to see aliens, laser beams. No one wants to see quiet moments and deep character interaction. And they want to make their money back.
This is what I think that sci-fi is about. It's looking at humanity in a specific manner, the whole Planet of the Hats thing. They're taking an extreme circumstance.
Sorry, I just love that phrase. And it always makes me think, like, that should be a band or something.
But they're taking an extreme circumstance to show us ourselves and to highlight possibilities. That's what I feel sci-fi is about, and that is what I feel that this film does, and what I really enjoy about it. Talking about peace and understanding and working together as humanity.
I feel this movie actually does a really good job of getting that message of, we are all of the same tribe. We are all the same people. And they don't do it in such a way that, as we love to say on the podcast, with fists of ham.
This is a very kosher movie.
It does it in character moments. And
the characters are all so believable and real.
And very rarely does anyone ever, you know, pull rank on someone because of narrative. The moment where the two governments decide that they're not going to cooperate and the two scientific crews have to split up, one has to go to Discovery and the other stay on the Leonov, it's so great how they do that. And the way the actors portray it, you can tell
they're disappointed as hell with all that.
They don't agree with what their governments are doing. They're scientists, but they do have their loyalties to their countries. I think they're all hoping for a better resolution, and they just have to sort of go through the motions for a while. And I mean, this is totally proved out when Haywood gets the message from Bowman, which Hal relates to him. Another sequence that I really enjoyed. I mean, think about this. Here you have an actor... Here, let me finish that thought. He gets the message that they have to get their asses out of there in 2 days or something. You know, they're not going to survive. And then the two teams just come together. So that totally proves out. But just jumping back to my Hal moment, this is a light bulb under a glass case. I've never actually looked up what the actor's name is. It is a Canadian actor, though, so we can take some pride in that. But his portrayal of Hal and the emotion that he puts behind the voice and the way that the actors totally sell talking to this light bulb in the wall. Like, these are all real moments. Hal is a very believable, living character in this movie.
At the same time, I actually didn't like Hal in this movie.
Oh! Take the knife out of my ribs. Okay, you have to expand on that.
I felt that he was almost sort of shoehorned in a little bit. As I said, I enjoyed the scene where he was told the truth, but he didn't feel like much of a presence in this one. It felt like such a departure from the Hal that I was looking at, and it might have just been expectation when it came to Hal.
But this is why...
Hal is more of a side character to Dr. Chandra, because he has Sal earlier on in the film talking to him, and everyone reacts more so to him than they do to Hal. Hal is more an extension of Chandra's character.
An interesting trivia note, Sal earlier in the film was voiced by Candice Bergen. And this is the reason why I think that, you know, a few more minutes, just having a conversation or a longer conversation, you know, seeing some of the... It would have been cool, you know how you've got those movies where you've got the one scientist or the one guy who gets obsessed with the book or the problem and he locks himself in the room.
Starts staring at the sun to become a creature. It's just...
I thought it would have been neat to see Chandra actually address the fact that he is spending all of his time trying to get Hal back to this place of being operational and healthy. Like you said, Hal is an extension of Chandra. So Chandra's probably one of the least served characters from the American crew. There's probably deleted scenes or things in the script that just didn't get shot or just didn't make the cut. Unfortunately, the release of this movie, you know, Shout Factory or some of these stars or Anchor Bay, I don't know if Anchor Bay is still in existence. Nobody has gone in and given this like the classic collector sort of treatment, which I wish they would, because I think this movie deserves it. I don't know a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, so I don't know if that stuff exists, but I feel it should. And maybe it's in the book. After watching these two movies in quick succession, I'm totally sold on reading these books. They're in the queue, and I'm going to be getting to them as soon as I can. So I'm excited to find out. But yeah, I totally. This is when I argued that I wish there was more running time given to this movie. These are the things that I would have wanted to see, just to increase the tone, the feeling of isolation, and the scope of the project, and the time that they're out there.
And the last thing I'll say before moving on to some shout-outs is that at the end of the film, it seems to me like the entire mission was a waste of everybody's time and money.
It totally was.
They go out there and they come back with the message from Hal that, hey, this is my gift to you. The plants and the birds are all humanities to play with. Just don't eat from the tree. Don't go to Europa. But Dave has proven that he can go to Earth to talk to anybody at any frickin' time pretty much instantaneously. He could have done that himself. They did not need to go out there in the first place. They just happened to be going out there, and they didn't know that it was a waste of their time at the time.
This just occurred to me now. To be fair, he goes to talk to his wife and his mother, and he says that he's being allowed to have these conversations. And when he talks to Dr. Floyd, he says, "You won't hear from me again."
Well, presumably, it could just be that's what he's allowed to say.
So
he's allowed to talk to them because they happen to be there.
But the alien intelligence might not allow him, for whatever their reasons are. I agree with you that this is a minor glitch, but for whatever reason, they may not want him going and announcing, "Oh, just by the way, here's the message." Because you also sort of need someone to witness. You need somebody to witness and to come back and tell the story. If they just got like an email and a new sun appeared, I don't know, I think the nukes would have flown. But yeah, it was a waste, well, not a wasted trip, but it was kind of a pointless trip. I mean, they didn't really...
Unless the whole point of the trip was to get Max killed. Sorry, Yakov.
Max! I find it very strange that I also recently guested on another podcast where we talked about the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, which also has John Lithgow and Yakov Smirnoff in it, and was also released in 1984.
We'll get to it on the show here eventually.
We will. I'm so looking forward to the day that we do. Just that stood out in my head while I was watching it. I was like, here's another great 1984 sci-fi with these two guys in it. If Peter Weller walked on, I would have wept. So, would you recommend it?
I would recommend it. This is actually a really good sci-fi that hits all the points it should, and it's a great human drama.
Thumbs up.
Political thriller.
Actually, I'm not sure if we can say thumbs up. That might be copyright.
Half chub, half Cyril Sneer.
So that essentially brings us to a close of the commentary parts of the show. Dustin gave a mention that we're going to do a few shout-outs. We didn't get to do them last time.
Not because we forgot, because we're stupid and dumb.
There was a reason.
Was there?
I think there was. I don't think we forgot, but...
I think we forgot. Because we planned on making it an all things considered sort of thing.
Anyways. So, as usual, there's been a lot of activity on the YouTube comment section. A lot of great comments from people who are enjoying the show, letting us know what they think, joining the conversation, as it were, something that we set out to basically do at the very launch of this podcast. And we appreciate every comment and every like and every share that you guys are doing. Our meager way of paying back is just giving some shout-outs on the show.
Letting you know that we read your comments, even if we didn't respond to every last one of them.
So I'm going to start by mentioning thanks Whiplash Games and Omega Star 19 and Heaven's Knight for your comments on our Airplane and The Thing episodes, respectively.
Thank you to Stephen Davis. And when it comes to captions, that might be hard to do, but it's something that is a consideration, I suppose. Possible.
That is something that I'm actually going to address when we're done our shoutouts. But yeah.
Oh, there you go. Something to talk about. And thank you to Let's Play PC as well. Talking about the French Connection and possibly agreeing.
We also had comments from Fabulous Dolphin, The Murder of Coke, and Mario Riestra, commenting on The Thing, Brazil, and Dustin's In Case You Were Considering episode of Necromantic.
We appreciate the comments from Wiz Sauce and Tiffany Clark on Magnolia and La Jetée.
We've already mentioned Garrett once this podcast, but Garrett also commented on our 2001 episode, and Attic Hatch Sound on our Thing episode, and Monsieur 99 on our last All Things Considered featuring Ready Player One.
Though I'm pretty sure that should be Monsieur 99. And thanks to Lazarus, and happy that you managed to find us, as well as Tom Reed and Vicky Adams, talking about The Thing, talking about Full Metal Jacket, Cairo, 2001.
And lastly, Huntmaster Gutentag, who I believe posted today about Unforgiven, which I'm officially referring to as an essay. Very well thought out comment. Enjoyed reading it. Thanks, Huntmaster Gutentag. And Robert Galetta, also commenting today on Brazil, mentioning the value of tragedy and the need for satire. So thank you guys so much for interacting with us on the media. We appreciate it so much. We love hearing your comments.
You don't know how excited Mike gets when we get numbers and comments and all that stuff.
I'd love to give shout-outs to like every new subscriber. We're getting new subscribers every day. The word is getting out there. Somebody is spreading it.
At some point, we hope to have too many to possibly respond to, but we will love you guys always.
Well, at this moment, there are actually too many new subscribers to respond to. So just, if you are listening to the show and you've subscribed to the show, to the channel in the last few months, you guys are awesome, and know that we know you're out there and we think you're great.
We do it for you, and also ourselves, but also you.
So if you have any comments of your own on any of the movies that we've covered today, or just anything in general, you can find us on our Facebook page. You can find us on Twitter at FYC Show. You can find us on Instagram. And we also have a WordPress blog, fycshow.wordpress.com. Like, share, follow, subscribe on all the social media. And we also have the Patreon page. If you want to go that extra mile and support the show financially, we have some reward tiers that we think are fun. Maybe on one of these episodes, maybe we should actually talk about the Patreon and break down the reward tiers. That might be a good plan. I don't know. And finally, just to address the closed captioning, we had a comment from Stephen Davis, which Dustin called out regarding closed captioning. I thought the automatic YouTube closed captioning would be fine, but apparently it's shit. Stephen brings up an interesting point. He says there are people who are hard of hearing who might want to check out our episodes. And I am looking into right now trying to find a way of doing that where we can get some decent captions where someone doesn't have to actually sit down and physically type out every word that we speak.
And time them out.
Yeah. So as soon as I find, a rational, reasonable way to do it in some sort of electronic, automatic way, totally going to be down with it. So hang in there, Steven, although you're probably not listening to the show. And that's it for me.
And we hope to see you next week when we are looking at my pick this time around.
1927's Fritz Lang sci-fi silent film classic, Metropolis.
The new oldest film that I have ever seen in my life, and definitely the oldest film that we've done on the show. 91 years old. It's an old film.
I think Duck Soup might be... Duck Soup or 39 Steps would be the...
White Zombie, 31.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about White Zombie.
And it's our first silent film.
That it is. I'm really looking forward to getting that episode out. It was a good conversation. And it's one of those movies where...
It's part of the zeitgeist, but nobody's ever seen it.
And if you haven't seen it, you probably don't know what it's about. Even though you've seen images for 90 years. Yeah, crazy. And yeah, it's influenced everything. There are pieces of Metropolis in everything genre related. So thanks again so much for joining us. As always, we've had a great time. You guys are fantastic.
We hope you had a good time too.
And we look forward to catching you guys next week on another episode of For Your Consideration.
Until then, I've been your host, Dustin Friesenham.
And I've been your host, Mike Josick.
Take care.
Ciao. Spoilers ahead. I almost said podcasts ahead.
There are also podcasts ahead.
Much podcasting ahead.
My God, it's full of stars.